Thank you very much. Great to be here again, and thank you. It's going to be a great day today, and I think, you know, some of you have already heard me in my presentation, but if there are any newcomers, I'll give you the full speech. So I'm going to be here for you for about an hour. I'm going to spend quite a lot of time here talking about my own life and my own perspectives. But as by now you probably heard that I had the great fortune of showing up at a little shitty company called Yolti that later became Skype. Besides that, I've done quite a lot of things. I've also invested quite a lot. I had the great fortune of investing in a company called Lamoda. Anyone know of it? Yes? How many have actually bought anything from Lamoda? Wow, that makes me super proud. Because when I came here first and invested in 3 young German entrepreneurs that wanted to take on the Russian market, people said I was totally mad, stupid. You know, I nearly invested 150 million euros into Lamoda. And the main perception when I talked about people on the streets here is like, it will never work, Jonas, because every sane person knows that you have to try the shoes on before you buy them. So, but it worked out, and you are my gratification that it actually worked. So many people buying from Lamoda, great fun. I also had the great opportunity investing into Swedish guys, Jonas and Philip, that came here and started a company called Avito, which is also working out okay. Anyone bought anything from Avito? Again, yeah, well, I nailed it. So that also really worked out. And you heard I've invested in a lot of companies. I also was the chairman of the board for a company called iCloud. That was really early on. It was a small Swedish company. It did cloud solutions. And I really believed in this. But it took about 5 years before the fruit company called and wanted to buy us. But I've invested a bit, but I've also started more than 40 different companies. I started a company called Kenetworks, together with Gustav Söderström, who's one of the CFOs or CTOs of Spotify today, a company called Player.io, and a company called Nanuba. I sold all of these companies to Yahoo. So if you ever have a company that is not working out, call Yahoo. Because with a bit of persuasion, they buy everything. The problem is they're just getting smaller and smaller by the hour, but so you don't have that much time left to sell anything to Yahoo. I also do a lot of different stuff. I'm also in the digital board of IKEA, trying to help them out to understand the perspective. I also work for the Boston Consulting Group, trying to help them understand, you know, where the world is going. But as you heard, my life has always been, how do you change the game? How do you take a perfectly working business model that you see outside and destroy it? That's my passion. That's what I get out of bed. It's like, if there's a retailer working, making money, if there's a bank making money, there must be a way to disrupt it and destroy it. That's my passion. That's what I love doing, destroying the old economy. Problem is I'm also becoming old now, so you need to come and destroy me. That's the next part of life. So my life has always been a game changer. But if this be the normal lecture, I'd be standing here and I'm talking to you, but please interrupt me, say I'm wrong. Let's see if we can get the dialogue going. I know this is very easy for your culture, but let's try it anyway. So maybe we should start with the first question. Is it the big that beat the small, or is it the fast that beat the slow? Anyone? Fast? Big? Okay, hands up for the fast that beat the slow. Okay, and there's some hands for the big that beat the small. It's not a lot of hands, and all the rest, you just don't care? Or you've understood it's a trick question. It is actually a trick question. So either you were sleeping or you were super smart. But it all depends, because this was my challenge. You know, you could start a company like Skype, and we were always, it's the fast that beat the slow, you know, and we ran like hell and we were super successful. I started another company, ran like hell. total failure, total misery. And it didn't work out. So that was actually my challenge. Why was something successful once, and then in another perspective it was a total misery? So after I had the time of the exit of Skype, I was like really puzzled. So I had the opportunity to go to Stanford University and starting teaching. How many here have been to Stanford? One, cool, congratulations. The rest of you should all go, but you should leave before you get to California soft. But it was great fun, it was an old dream, and I started lecturing there. But after a while, my professor, Tom Kosnick, he came to me and said, Jonas, we're super happy with what you're doing, you know, you're really provocative, the students really love you, but we wonder if you would be interested of some feedback. And I'm like, no, not already. It's only been 3 weeks. I don't know how it is for you. You're all top students. But for me, when I hear the word feedback, it's never positive. It's always negative. So my mind is racing and I'm thinking, maybe that means that I should give feedback on Stanford. But it wasn't, no. And then you're like humble. Of course, I'm super happy with feedback. And we sat down and said, okay, Jonas, what have I done wrong? And he said, well, it's not that, you know, it's really good, you know, students love you, yada, yada. But we just have one little challenge, Jonas. We have noticed that you haven't read the literature that you're teaching about. Fair point. I could see that. You know, how many have read this American management literature? You can pick them up on any airport. Not a lot of people. You haven't missed anything. Most of these books are actually shit boring. And I thought the same thing, you know. I thought, you know, you just read the first chapter, second chapter, you get the theory, you know, you skip the pages in the middle, you read the summary, and that off you went. But I had to sit down and I had to read all of the literature because I couldn't get caught again. And I came to the same conclusion. These books are actually shit boring. So I went to Tom and said, you know, these books are shit boring. Why don't you write a new book about all your knowledge, you know, teaching at Harvard, moving to Stanford, now teaching entrepreneurship at the master's level. Why haven't you written a book? And he's like, I haven't come around to it. I said, let's do it together. And he said, that's a cool idea. I said, let's do it. And then I said, yes, let's do it. But if we do it, I would like to do it my way. And he was a bit skeptic, of course. And I said, yeah, if we're going to do it, I want to write a book that is 100 pages long and half has to be pictures. He was not utterly convinced. I'll tell you that. I said, no, but this is what the world needs. We need something different. So we sat off. We wrote the book. We were super proud. We printed it in beta, and then we sent it to his former colleagues at Harvard. What do you think they said when they saw this book? Bullshit, yeah, well, maybe that's what they were thinking. I was thinking more they would come back, this is awesome, this is innovative, this is brilliant, Jonas. I was waiting for that feedback. But they were probably thinking, this is bullshit. But they didn't really express it that way because that would be polite. So they were more like, oh, Tom, this is so sweet. You've made a children's book. And now Tom, he was totally devastated. You know, have to cancel the book. It's my reputation. I'm going to die. And I'm like, Tom, let's just, you know, calm down here a bit. You know, what do 30 Harvard professors really know about writing books? And he's, a lot. And I said, no, Tom, trust me, it's going to be all right. They just don't understand my brilliance. It happens all the time. Just relax. It's going to be great. Let's go talk to the big publishing houses around the world. They must understand my brilliance. So I went around and I talked to all the biggest publishing houses in the world. What do you think they said when they saw this book? It's so sweet, yes. Basically, children's department is down the hall, Jonas. Interesting format, but have you ever went to a library, checked out normal educational books, and they said thank you, and then you came home, and then they sent me letters, with a stamp on, came to my mailbox, really sweet, saying, "Dear Mr. Къеллберg, we wish you great success somewhere else." What do you do with that kind of information? It's goddamn useless. I was denied by all publisher, and I just, exited Skype, made a shitload of money. I thought I was the goddamn rock star of the world. I could not convince, 30 different publishers about my brilliance. So it's painful. So it's okay, but it's not that difficult to publish books. You print it on paper, you start selling it on Amazon. And I did. And since I was pissed, I was misunderstood, I went back and I wrote another book. And this book has only pictures. Basically, fuck you all. Now there's a third book published by Wiley, one of the most prestigious publishing houses in the world, translated to 16 different languages. Why do you think they would call me back and say, "Dear Mr. Къеллберg, what we believed was sweet, non-publishable, we are willing to change because now we understand your brilliance"? They didn't really put it that way. They just said, "We would be happy to publish your book." Why do you think they changed their mind? Anyone? We sold. And apparently that's so interesting. If you have very rigorous academic standards how a book should look like, when it sold well, they were willing to change it. So, what's the book about? So the book is about the 9 different gears used at Stanford and developed at Harvard to actually publish and drive successful companies. This is what I use when I invest. This is what I use in my methodology. It took me quite some time. Nothing new in these books. It's just, a way to package it together. I'm not going to talk about all the different things today. I'm just going to talk about 3 of the different gears: customer acquisition, business model, and delight. And customer acquisition is in the center, as you see, because let's be honest, if you don't sell stuff, if you can't convince people about your brilliance, it's very hard to get people to call you back. But this is where my journey started. I had the great opportunity at starting to work for this big investment company, Kinnevik Group, that I later came back and worked and did the investments into Lamoda and Avito and so on. And I started there as a CEO assistant. And as a CEO assistant, you cook coffee, you repark cars, you do a shitload of PowerPoints. And what's tradition for this company is that after this first year, you become the CEO of one of their subsidiaries, like an apprentice thing. And that felt natural for me, I had a double degree in engineering and in marketing, spent 1 year with top management. Of course, I should become the CEO of a company. Felt very natural. That's exactly what happened. And now you're all students, what's the first thing you do when you become the CEO and leader of a new company? What do we need? What do they teach? Talk to people? Yes, good. You can talk to your crew, the personnel, the employees is great. That's a very good thing. Maybe you can just fire someone randomly, see if you actually are the boss or not. Yes? Sorry? How to cook coffee in a new way, yes. Maybe if you're lucky, someone else cooks the coffee for you. If you're really the CEO. What more? Besides firing someone and getting coffee do we need? Bottom line, strategy. I'm hearing, we need a strategy, of course, huh? And this is where I could excel. I could sit in my new corner office and I could do 200 PowerPoint slides about my own brilliance and why this is going to be great. But this is where it hit me. The only thing the board cared about was new customers, new revenue. Have you ever thought how easy it is to add customers in Excel? It's a very brilliant tool. It's much harder getting them in real life. So I panicked. I didn't really know anything around sales. And since I studied both economy and technology at the same time, I skipped, the economy lessons quite a lot. So I said, okay, I must have missed this super important lecture around sales. So I went through and I checked all my previous literature, and I found this model in a lot of books. It must be shit important. What is it? What kind of model is it? Anyone know? Yes, it's the BCG growth share matrix. Well, do you think, they gave me the star company? No. Do you think I got the company that made money? No. They gave me the dog. What do you do with the dog in this matrix? You kill it, you divest. Well, thank you, BCG. That didn't really help me. I was stuck in that quadrant. But luckily, I found A.A. Akers' SWOT model. How many here have done a SWOT model? Cool, nearly everyone. Let's put Yonas Къеллберg 20 years ago in here. What comes out? A lot of weaknesses. A lot of weaknesses. Still predominant. I'm just better in covering it up now. So, didn't really help me either. But I knew nothing around sales. And the company was really going sideways, and I was starting to panic. I was trying all these different things. In the end, I was so distressed, it ended up I called my father. And he was very surprised. He said, Jonas, you little arrogant bastard. You must be in a really shitty position before you call me for advice. You with all your university degrees, you got it all figured out. But when really shit hits the fan, you have to call me back. And I said, yeah, I know you've been a sales guy all your life, and I'm now the CEO, and I can't figure out how to sell stuff. And it seems to be the only thing everyone cares about. I said, okay, well, I have an old friend coming over in the next couple of weeks. He started as a sales guy, and he's now the CEO of NCR, one of the largest Fortune 500 companies in the US. And I said, that'd be great. And I was really stoked about, meeting this guy. Started as a sales guy, ended up as the CEO. And we meet. And the only thing he gives me is a small brochure that says 100 knack, 10 snack, 1 tack från en framgångsrik Electroluxförsäljare. That was in Swedish, basically saying you need to knock on 100 doors, talk to 10 people before you get one yes from a famous vacuum clean sales guy. And I'm like, what? You must have misunderstood. I do the difficult shit. I'm the CEO. And he just said, read it, you'll figure it out. And since I loved maths and I was an engineer, I sat down, I read it, and I started thinking around it. You knock on 100 doors, you talk to 10 people, you get one yes. You do 200, you sell more. It's not complicated. It's actually super simple, isn't it? It's super simple, it's maths. It's not complicated at all. Then you can make it a bit more difficult. You can talk about frequency. But in the end, it's all about how do you drive frequency. And then you can say, okay, what's the implication of this story? Why is it important? Because I would say in all the successful companies I've been part of, unlocking customer acquisition is one of the key aspects of every single ventures. And you think that the company like this will go up and tell you about how they do it? No, it's one of the most kept secrets. And coming around the corner, I would say with all the AI and all the machine learning today, we're seeing a total different mechanics driving this. So I would say really, really invest in this. But then you can say, okay, but that's not where I was, but that's the conclusion. My life was more like, as a CEO, it was more about knocking on doors. I came to this because I was the CEO of this telco company. We started knocking on doors. It was a bit slow. So I said, what happens if we call everyone in Sweden? dial pad. We got some operators in. And we started calling. But I came to the conclusion this was a bit slow. You know, they had to dial on the dial pad. And I said, what happens if we connect a computer to the dial pad? Then we could actually call 10 phones at the same time, and when someone answered, we'd actually connected the call. We increased frequency, we sold more. Next part is that you needed a lot of phone numbers. These phone numbers could be super expensive. Could cost nearly €5 a piece if you wanted to buy them from Vodafone. Then I came up with the conclusion, what happens if we call all number combinations available? And I told the operators. And they just thought I was utterly mad. And they refused. But the beauty here is that the computer never complained. It called every number. Until we one day, we called this red phone in Muskö Naval Base outside Stockholm. And this red phone is only used for the Prime Minister. Överste Jansson, what can I do for you, Prime Minister? Yes, this is from Optimal Telecom. We would wonder if you would want to buy some cheap telephony. Later that day, I was picked up by our Swedish secret police. And I was placed in their beautiful facilities, and I was kept there for more than 36 hours before I could convince them I was not the Russian spy. I was just a desperate CEO trying to hit his numbers. But I could also, with very clear uncertainty, tell them that if they had more red phones on the public network, we would be calling them as well, asking them if they would like to buy some cheap telephony. So what's the results? What's the essence in this story? It's more that computer power, as I used it early on, actually drove frequency. Will this work today? No, but there's so much more computer power driving personalization and customer acquisition. So the perception around this is key. And then you say, okay, but that's not it. But my advice to you as students is, for everything you want, this math perspective applies. 110, 1. If that's getting a job, if it's basically convincing one to start working there, everything is basically a numbers game. And you need to do your maths, you need to do your numbers and understand, because if you want to go places, you need to break it down in a methodology good perspective. You need to take every foot forward and just keep on going. That's the perspective. So don't forget this. And people will not talk about this on stage, because we'll talk about all the other things. But if you cannot unlock customer acquisition, if you cannot convince people, if you cannot drive your perspective and own agenda, you will not make it. And this is where I say most companies that fail today fail in the growth phase. So remember that. But my life, understanding this customer was perfect. I started another telco company. IPO'd it, started another one, sold it to Vodafone. My life was perfect. Then I got a call from a headhunter asking me if I wanted to become the CEO of a company called Lycos. Anyone remember it? It was basically the third largest search engine in the world after Yahoo and Alta Vista. And I had been in telco, was super stoked about the internet, felt I wanted to get into the game, so I really wanted the job. But the challenge was that this headhunter, she was a bit curious and said, Jonas, you know, look at your resume, it looks great. There's just one thing that worries me. I see no failures. And I'm like, don't worry, I'm a total misfit. You know, I'm just really, really good at covering my tracks. But she wasn't really convinced, but I convinced her, don't worry, I fail all the time. I got the job. Super stoked. What do you think basically happened the first day I started? I failed. Dropped sales, not yet, but there was a little small shitty company that was founded in Palo Alto. Google, yes. So, what does a big company like Lycos, because Lycos was owned by Telefonica, one big telco operator, and Bertelsmann, a big German media house. What do you think the board of directors do when a shitty little company like Google was founded? Nothing exactly. We're like, go ahead guys, good luck. Next thing, what do you think we do afterwards when they're still around? Still don't give a shit. Yeah, but we're still a bit worried. We tell them that we don't give a shit, but we're worried. And then we make fun of them. It's like, they will never survive. How will they ever survive? They don't even have a business model. They're probably going to die. And when that's not working, what does big management do at this point in time? Try to buy them, of course. So we got the best German lawyers with the most expensive suits. We sent them to California. What do you think they came back with for a recommendation? Should we buy the company or not? We should not. Because they were not making money. They were burning through cash. They didn't have a business model. And their technology was not as advanced as the ones we had. Big mistake. But things were not working out for me. I was really selling as hell and things were not going well. You know, Google talked about always delighting the user. My life had always delight the shareholder. Let's just bring on customers. But again, you know, it was not really working out for me. So I had to go to the chairman of the board, Christoph Mohn, and I said, Christoph, they're really killing us. You know, we really need to think outside the box here. And then he just looked at me and said, Jonas, there is a reason we have the box. That is because you should be inside the box and not outside the box. Otherwise, we would not have the box. Super simple. Stupid me, of course. Let's stay inside the box. So when Google said content is king, I said sales is King Kong, and I just pushed my sales throttles. Do you think it was a success? No, it was an epic failure. Epic, Lycos listed at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, me CEO, not a very pretty sight. We'll come back to that failure as well. But what did Google do? They delighted the user. And when I say the word delight, what comes to mind? Anyone? What's top of your head? Sorry? Surprise, healthy, yeah. So we've taken delight. How many heard about unique selling proposition, USP? Couple of people? Yeah. We've taken this from the hierarchy of customer needs. How many know Maslow's hierarchies of needs? You have that in Russia, yeah? Yeah. Cool. Yeah, this works the same way. At the bottom you have functionality, up. Then I have efficiency, and at the top you have delight. I can give you an example. Alfa Romeo, you know, this Italian car, they have a very strong delight in their design. The problem here is if the car does not go from A to B, the delight falls. I can give you another example. Volvo, Swedish famous car, had a very strong delight. What was it? Safety, yeah? But what do you think happens when all cars are as safe? Because during a period of time, they increased their safety features and customer satisfaction increased. But again, what happens when all cars are safe? You know, you introduce airbag number 25 for your knees. It becomes a functionality. And I'll tell you this, there is no customer going to knock on Volvo's store and say, what we loved with your car before is now a commodity. This is the Swedish Nokia. We don't really want to talk about it. Today, this car is owned by the Chinese. The best engineers in Sweden couldn't figure this one out. So we had to sell it to the Chinese, and they came back and told us it's going to be Scandinavian design, and off we go again. But this has surprised me because I spend today a lot of time talking to the big boards, the large companies. And I'm so surprised that most of all time and energy is spent around functionality and efficiency. But very, very little time is spent about creating tomorrow's delight. Because for me, that is the utterly most important perspective. But it's super difficult. You see it, you understand it, but over time, getting there is difficult. I can share a story. Harley Davidson had a strong challenge in the mid of the 80s. They were challenged by Japanese motorcycle, cheaper, better, faster. The company went in Chapter 11, bankrupt. The board of directors had to go away and to find what is our delight. And what they decided then still stands, and it's what we sell is the ability for a 43-year-old accountant to dress in black leather, ride through small towns and have people be afraid of him. And this is our innovation intent. Think about it. If you're doing a SWOT, okay, which customers love us? Hell's Angels. Okay, there's only one problem. They never pay their bills. Okay, we'll work on that. But that comes back to the perspective, what they enabled to do here is that they created a friction-free storytelling. It was not about driving a motorcycle from A to B. It was about being an outlaw, 30 minutes a weekend. That's what they were selling. And a normal motorcycle is $10,000. Being an outlaw 30 minutes a weekend is $30,000. So next lessons learned, if customer acquisition was important, your friction-free storytelling becomes even more important. You have 30 seconds to convince someone, why should I give a shit about your product? This is one of the hardest parts, because you start with technology, and then in the end, how do you package this? And I learned this the hard way in many startups, of course, but I think the one that first brought it to mind was a guy called Stefan Persson. He was the founder of H&M, and I had him in one of my boards. He said it took him 10 years to figure out H&M's delight. They were a small fashion retailer, grew to this huge, gigantic retailer, and the basis of doing that was that he decided, we're not the cheap clothing company. From today on, we're going to be a fashion company with a zero less on the price tag. But we're going to act as a fashion company, not as a low-price company. So if Prada has supermodels, so do we. If Gucci are on Fifth Avenue in New York, so are we. If Yves Saint Laurent takes $300 for a pair of jeans, we'll take $30. But from today on, we're a fashion company, and we're going to act like one. Don't like it? Leave. And it was a huge success. You know, it just drove stock price through the roof through the last 30 years. Then comes another company that starts a bit later and actually outgrows them. Which one? Zara, yes. When H&M was all about, you know, getting supply chain costs down by doing big assortment in Bangladesh, it was all about getting price down. Zara said, let's increase the cost for development, but let's make it so fast that the turnaround time is huge. Do you know what the friction-free storytelling is for Zara? We're first with the latest. What they can see on a runway in New York, they have in test stores in 3 weeks. They have super limited assortments, and they redefine their whole supply chain to deliver this. But they were making quite a lot of money, so I said, you know, let's see if we can disrupt them. And we started Lamoda. You know what their friction-free storytelling is at Lamoda? We dress code. It's a tech company. It's nothing else. It's a tech company. It's all about trying to understand what are you going to buy. But when I was in the board, everything was, according to me, quite ugly. Especially at Zalando, which was, you know, the equivalent to Lamoda. And I went to this head of fashion, and she said, could we maybe make Zalando a bit more beautiful, you know, a bit front page? And then she just looked at me and said, Jonas, never, ever underestimate the bad taste of Germans. because she came from BCG. For her, it was all about analytics. It was all trying to understand, what are you going to buy? It was a tech play. It had nothing to do with fashion. It's all about trying to understand, what are you going to buy? Go into Lamoda, Zalando, click around on men's shoes, and they will follow you. So, we talked about frequency. We talked about delight. We talked about business model. If you could put it in a bit more consulting perspective, you can talk about growth. You can talk about product market fit, and you can talk about business model innovation. And you need all of these three to be successful. For me, if you didn't innovate in the business model, life would be so much simpler. But unfortunately, you have to. I had the great opportunity to being part of this little company. And when I joined this company, I just called back to this headhunter, because this was just after my huge failure at Lycos. So I called back to this headhunter and I said, when you hired me, you were a bit afraid about failures. And now I have a great failure. You can cross that off your list. Do you have any more jobs for me? And then she just looked at me and said, Jonas, you don't understand. When I was talking about failures, I was saying I wanted something like, I wanted to win the Olympics in sailing, but you ended up 6th. What you've done here is like a career disaster. It's a career ending. I can never, ever work with you again. So I ended up, with some old friends that I've been working with at Tele2 at this investment company. And we looked at doing telephony. We thought it was super expensive. But when we started there, we said, okay, what's the delight? Calling from A to B. Quite simple. So I said, okay, we need to rethink here. And one of the first perspective was like, okay, but how do we price it? How do we make money? And I said, okay, let's think here. And I said, I'm a bit consulting, so maybe we can just do a benchmark here. Let's see how the long-distance calling has gone over the last year, and it's gone down constantly. So I said, okay, putting this forward, there's only one logical way to price this, and this is to 0. And everyone's like, brilliant, Jonas, but how are we going to make money? Just a little question. And I don't know. And they're like, goddamn moron, can't we fire this guy? Fucking idiot. Nicholas, can we fire him? It's like, do you know how difficult it is to hire people today? This is what we'll have to do with. And I'm like, thank you, come on. But I'm just not, no. I'm like super stubborn. I'm like, okay, because if we know that the market is going away nowadays, the only logic, it's going to happen. The only logical way is to price it to 0. And then Nicholas is, says, okay, interesting. So what do we need to do different if we want to keep this pricing? So we started the innovation in 0 game. Because if we wanted to price it to 0, we would need to reinvent a lot of things. And trust me, when I took the same crowd to see all the VCs, and we were there and we explained the brilliance of this, but we didn't have a revenue model, they were basically, you can all leave, guys, you're stupid. But we kept on thinking around it. But the first thing we said, well, let's benchmark with telcos. A telco loves to invest in infrastructure. They all want to buy all the masts. At Skype we said, let's use the internet that you've already purchased. We found our first 0. A telco loves to buy Ericsson switches. But we came to the conclusion it was actually the same CPU power in an Ericsson switch as in your computer. So we said, let's code the call in your computer that you'd purchased. We found another 0. To get great voice quality, you need to rack a lot of Cisco servers around the globe. We didn't have that kind of money. And by the way, how many here use Skype? Cool, that's a lot of people. How many people use Skype really early on in the days, like 10 years ago? That's a lot of people as well. Cool. Can you remember when you came back from your computer, you'd been on your computer, you went for coffee for 40 minutes, came back, and your computer was super hot, and the fan was blowing as Mac? Yes, you remember. Because then your computer had become a super node, and all traffic was routed through your computer. Because we said, sharing is caring. There's a lot of CPU power out there, but not being used. So we didn't have cost for building the network. Can you imagine all the big banks, government buildings, all the computers not being used? So we used them at night, so we found another zero. Customer service, I knew after running a couple of telcos, could be very, very expensive cost. Could stand for nearly 20% of our cost. My problem was often when I called Tele2's customer service, I was often more pissed after I talked to customer service than before. And I talked with all the friends at Skype, and we all had the same finding. You know, you were happy, you called customer service, and then you're super pissed. So we said again, the only logical way to do this is to make it impossible to call Skype. Took away our phone numbers from our business company cards. We placed the company in Luxembourg. We made it impossible to call Skype. Don't like it? Leave. Marketing. Big TV, telcos, they love marketing. TV, radio, the more the merrier. You have to have a great brand. We didn't have that kind of money. We had no money. So how do you do it? And let's be honest, Skype's a network service. The more people you add on, the better it becomes. The problem is, in the beginning, there's 100 people, no one gives a shit. So how do you figure this one out? We came up with the conclusion, what happens if we make a small pop-up after good call saying, would you like to recommend this service? And if you clicked on that button, since Skype was, and still is to some extent, a downloadable client, we went in and we opened your Outlook and we sent a mail from you to all of your contacts saying, hi, I've just started using Skype. This is my username and I would like to call you for free. We sent quite a lot of mails. And then you say, that can't be true. How weren't you stopped in all spam filters? No, it's simple. You just sent one mail to all of your friends just once. We had no cost for marketing. So, what's the essence? Well, the essence here, and I've taken this from Tom Kosnick's research at Harvard, is that one of the most important aspects if you ever want to grow a successful company is to innovate in zeros. Give me an example of companies that have been really good at innovating in zeros. Sorry? Telegram? I don't know them really well. What do they do? It's a messenger, yeah. So a messenger app, basically like Skype using internet. Yes, good. BlaBlaCar, super. No cost for cars. Uber, no cost for driver, no cost for cars. Yeah, Airbnb. Uber is now valued at $82 billion US. It's a goddamn app. Airbnb, now larger than the Hilton Group in the world, have no cost of inventory. What about companies like Amazon and Alibaba? No cost of inventory. They're now the biggest retailers in the world. What more? Waze? I don't know what they do. WhatsApp, but you can buy stuff. Yeah, so again, no inventory. So what a company like Apple, first you can say if you have a really strong delight, you can add a 0. Because if you can charge 30 euros for a charging cable, you're doing something good. And what about a company like Google? What do? Every night they go out and spider the whole web, download it into their servers, and then they sell advertising on someone else's content. But the interesting thing here, if you take all these companies that we talked about and innovating in zeros, and you look at the world's largest companies in the world, you will find all of these companies, or many that have all innovated in zeros. So according to me, the most fundamental perspective is innovating on your cost side. That's what all of these startups have done. It's not just about creating a great product, because you have to create something that you love, but you also have to create an innovation on your cost side. And this is what people don't talk about. So, how does it often work then? Because, we talked about customer acquisition, we talked about, the importance of delight, we talked about innovating in zeros. But how do you predict the future if you're running a company, large one, a small one? Because this is often where it happens, Because what does management do when they don't have a clue about the future? They observe, they ask someone, often they call McKinsey or BCG, and we come riding in our charming horses and we'll tell you everything's going to be all right. And this is often what we tell them if this is retail. I work with a lot of retail. We'll tell you that, footfall is declining, it's not really good. You're starting to get a headwind. And e-commerce is actually growing. But it's not that bad. And we say, yes, but there are some big competitors that are outgrowing the market. And then the manager says, but is it really that bad? And then we show them this graph and saying, well, for clothing, it's not really great. But, if you're in the furniture business, 82% or 92% is still going to be all right. You don't have to worry. Life is okay. And then you say, but maybe if we can, be in other parts of the world, the problem is that things are just growing even faster in the other parts of the world. But how big is the change? Because this is my perspective. And what we see is like 98% or 92% or 85% is still brick and mortar, so it can't be that bad. But my hypothesis is basically, will a new model have 100% uptake? So when I invest, I think, will 100% of everyone buy shoes on Lamoda? Will everyone buy shoes online? Because what I've noticed is that most trends actually go to 100%. It's totally irrelevant if you think it's 2, 3, 5, 6%, and we can talk about change. You need to ask yourself, do you believe that this new trend, IP telephony, streaming video, whatever it is, do you believe it's going to go to 100%? Because most trends actually go to 100%. And then you say, but it seemed really strange. And then I'll say, yeah, because McKinsey, they came out and said, maybe, the penetration of mobile phones is going to be 22%. And that's when the phones were 10 kilos. Then come Nokia. And since I'm an engineer, you know that since Ericsson is Swedish here, every great engineer knows that you need to have a good antenna on the phone. Nokia guys, they take away the antenna, put it in the phone, make it openable, and they make a consumer product. Takes it to the next trend. And then comes Microsoft and totally destroys it. Today we have a mobile penetration for around 130% in the world. So you need to ask yourself. And then people say, can you start late? Well, I think the challenge is, again, the digital market leader has one curve. If you want to outrun it, you have to have a more progressive curve. Because the challenge is when large companies look at the startups, like Google, we look at them and we see that the delta here is what we have with what they have is not that big. But if you actually put the same curve a bit further up, you should be looking at that delta, because you don't know how their 2.0 that they're going to release next week are going to look like. You don't know that they're negotiating with Google Ventures and they're just raising 200 million euros in new capital. So you need to really rethink your perspective. So for me, innovating in zeros drives change. Unit economics innovation is the driver of change. So if you really want to do things, you need to innovate in zeros. Because I would actually challenge this. I would say by innovating in zeros, you destroy and disrupt industries. This is a graph from how much money the music industry was making. Here comes Niklas Kaza and Napster, and they innovate in zeros because the cost of distributing music is zero. But you know what happened on the peak there? At the peak, the music industry released the DVD. So I would say that the projection was going from 10 euros from the CD to selling music and video for 20 euros a piece. I don't think any CEO was drawing that line. They were all about revenue. So for me, if you innovate in zeros, you can disrupt an industry, because what you're ultimately doing is you're taking away the fundament of the industry. We can take another example. You've probably seen this before. Kodak invented the digital camera. And people say they were disrupted. Yes, I would say they were disrupted in their business model. Because before, storage cost $50 in film. With a digital camera, the cost of storage was zero. So what happened, according to me, is that the whole industry of revenue disappeared. That's why the company died. Blockbuster. I often lecture together with Mark Randolph, one of the founders from Netflix. And he can tell you that they were in the room with Blockbusters and they wanted to sell the company to them. But they turned them down because Blockbuster felt that they had better technology. So why did Blockbuster die? Well, according to me, is selling popcorn and Coca-Cola and sweets in the store made much more money. So they just protected their old business model because it was much more profitable. That's why they did. And if you look at all the ones that are challenged, it's because the ones on the outside have innovated in zeros. They're challenging the fundamenta in your business model because they're operating cheaper. Because you're taking a model where you often have maybe 40% profit in retail, 60% cost. You take Alibaba or Amazon's marketplace, they have 98% cost, 2% revenue, but they have an exponential model. You don't see any yellow pages anymore. We'll see how long we see the normal cabs until everything is Uber, because they just have a more efficient business model. So if you want to start a company, if you want to change the world, if you want to educate the boring people in the boards, you need to understand that the fundament of this is innovating in zeros. It's a fundamental shift in thinking. This is a picture taken from H&M's last quarterly report. And the thing what I think is interesting with this is that they've came out and now presented that the online model that everyone criticized me when I invested in Lamoda and in Zalando is now more profitable. It's actually online sales is more profitable than brick and mortar. And if that's the case, it's more about when will this retail Armageddon happen. And the interesting, when I meet leaders and people in the retail industry, they say, but Jonas, this picture must be wrong. It's not like, oh, interesting, it must be wrong. But let's just remember, H&M, they're listed at the New York Stock Exchange. If this is wrong, Jyrki, the CFO, he's going to jail. So, the challenge here is again that, their store sales is flattening totally and online is growing. But if you put the graphs together, the question is, will they ever make it? And then you look at companies like Amazon that have innovated in zeros. But what people think here is that they are a retail company. But what they actually do is that they're a search engine. 55% of all searches in the US on products start at Amazon. So they have a unique customer acquisition tool. They've not only innovated in zeros, they've also found a way to get customers to start their journey at Amazon. So that's why they're scary. So what's the lessons learned here? What to do? I would say innovate, don't imitate. This is really, really difficult. Can be done. I know there's a lot of Russian models trying to look at something else and just doing the same. But then you really need to innovate beyond. But if you then channel back and talk about all the things I've talked about, I would say if you create a company that innovates in zeros, you can actually have an exponential model. Because most brick and mortar, most industries today are linear. You add one store, you add one tractor, you do it better. But if you innovate in zeros, you can have an exponential model. That's why these companies are valued so much, because it's not about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's more about 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, building that exponential model. The problem here is for you as individuals is actually when you come to the establishment and talk about this, how you need to drive an exponential model, you're often ending up here in the disappointment phase. Because that's where you start. That's what I am. And I'm like, look, no, things are happening. Trust me. And they're like, Jonas, you're burning through cash. This is never going to work. And I'm not really sure either. So I think you have to ask yourself a fundamental question. Are you a game changer as an individual, willing to play the game? Or are you just an outperformer, like we learned in school? I don't know how it is, maybe the universities are different here in Moscow, but when I went to school, it's a lot about just outperforming, being better. But for me, it's all about thinking different, being a game changer, rethink the existing, challenge the existing, think in a different way, do the things that you're not allowed to do. So game changer, outperformer, you decide. And be honest to yourself. You don't have to be honest to the rest of the world, but be honest to yourself. Do you really have it? And then you can say, okay, Jonas, you've been here, you've been talking for an hour now, which is, a long time. I bored you quite a lot. And what is the takeaway? I would say there are 3 things to think about. 3 questions you should ask yourself, and they're not very complicated. What are you selling? To who? And how? And in the end, why are you doing it? And making money here is not a good answer. Sorry. I can even ask my 12-year-old son this, who's running a company. Philip, what are you selling? I'm selling cookies. Okay, fair point. To who and how? I'm selling it to the people that enter the local community train every morning. Okay, fair point, smart. Why, Philip? Why are your cookies going to be better than all the other cookies in the world? Why are you going to outcompete Procter & Gamble, Unilever? Why, Philip, are your cookies better? And then he looks at me and says, no, we have to because we're going on a class journey. Okay, fair point. Doesn't have to be that more complicated, Normal parents, they would have stopped there, but his father can't. He's like, Philip, how have you innovated in zeros in this model? We talked about the importance of innovating in zeros. You can't run a business model without innovating in zeros. And then he thinks for a while and comes to the conclusion, if mother buys the cookies, I make so much more. And I'm like, yes, Philip, now you found your first zero. Thank you, that was all for me.
И сейчас состоится сессия ответов на вопросы, так что вы можете подходить к микрофону в левом или правом конце зала. Йонас ответит на них.
So I think we have time for some questions.
Hi.
Hi. I can't see you. You're dark, but you're somewhere up there.
Yeah. My name is Maria.
Hi, Maria.
Hi. And I'm working for one of the biggest retail in Russia. So my question is simple. Do you really think that the world of big IT companies is suitable for people? Cost savings, zero costs that ruined the industry of advertisement, not only in Russia. People without workplaces, cars without drivers. Is it good for our world? Sorry, it's about social responsibility.
Yeah, so I think it's a really, really valid question. I work a lot with AI, and I've even founded an AI sustainability center. Then I think, though, from a perspective, I think in all industries, in all parts of the world, new technology have led to new perspective, if that's building ships, whatever it is. So I think we're working for the inevitable, because if you do retail more cheaper by doing it online, most business will actually move there. Where people actually end up, I think it's going to be more difficult. I think what happened is that the human brain is very innovative. So what happens is that we invent quite a lot of new services. You know, if you look today at the industry that is building apps or games is today so much bigger than all the other industries were. That was an industry that wasn't there before. So I don't know if it's a good or bad answer, and I'm not a national economic that may be suited to the answer. I'm just there trying to find that next idea.
Thank you, but it's not
a good answer, I know.
Thank you.
And I know it wasn't the answer you were wanting for me to answer either. So, but I think,
hi, Jonas.
Yes, hi.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Thank you. At first, my name is Timur Sultanov, and I want to ask you if you're looking for new projects on earlier stages to invest, and how can I connect to you if yes?
Well, I think you're already asked for that. Well, I think I'm very selective with my time. I do invest. I invest most in the people I like working with. I'm doing it on a very local scale right now. But yes, and for anyone, you just add me on LinkedIn and post whatever you want, and I often answer all of the things. So if you have a great idea, I will be calling you back, especially if you can answer those specifics. This is why I've innovated in customer acquisition. I found a loophole. Number two, these are the innovating in zeros, and this is my people really love my service. If you answer those three things right, and I will be calling you back directly.
Okay,
if you can't hit any of them, I won't be calling you.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a question about the stuff you didn't mention. So you were talking a lot about like future innovation, making to zeros and stuff. But still, in the graph about music, I don't know the exact name of it. We had a small amount of profit,
Yeah.
which was done by selling vinyl music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what is the deal about all this nostalgic stuff, and when people are going to like pay more, like 3 times, 4 times for just this feeling? It's not so innovative. It's not so like through the future, and still people are going to pay.
I think it's a very interesting thing, because if you see in the food and beverage industry, for example, in the beer industry, what has happened is that there's so many local breweries now actually opening up, and they actually do more shitty beer than the real big beer companies like Heineken and Budweiser. They do it locally, and the price is much higher, and the beer of quality is not as good, but they have a local connection to it. So I think there's an antidote of all large companies, and that's what you call the local brands are now increasing. If then that is buying vinyls, or if it's by buying old cars, you see that prices of old cars. So I think there's a human perspective of being different and driving your own personal pride. So if you're an entrepreneur, you can probably do really good business in also revising these, old trends. Even if it's not, innovating in zeros, it could still be a good business.
And still, if we talk not about like some local brands, for example, beer, but if we talk about Prada, Louis Vuitton, they are just overhighing their prices like thousands of times, and still people buy it.
Yes, but I think they have innovated in zeros because they put an extra zero on the price.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks.
If you have a great product, try it, and they're not selling clothes, they're selling personal pride, no one with a state mind needs a handbag for 3,000 euros to carry stuff around. It's just a show off, So then people love that perspective to showing off that they bought an expensive handbag. So they found the perspective to innovate in zeros because the handbag is super cheap to produce. And they created something around it. So they innovated in zeros and put this extra zero behind the price.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Alina. I'm 17 years old. So I want to ask you, you told that trend should be 100%, but it is said in Russia that a healthy lifestyle is new trend. So it's not 100%. So what do you think about healthy lifestyle as a trend?
So I believe a healthier lifestyle is going to 100%. Then it's more about people then we can always define, about what is 100%. But I think constantly a lot of people are already now more conscious about what they're eating, how much they're drinking, how much they're sleeping. So I think we're coming in an age where people are starting to reflect their well-being even more. I think this is a huge trend, and it's I would say there is nearly not one person soon in the Western world that has not tried, a Caesar salad or a Diet Coke or something else that is actually providing that trend of 100% have tried it.
Thank you.